war, the rising tensions between nuclear-armed global superpowers, economic decline, the rising cost of living and increasing levels of uncertainty about one's stability in the marketplace, political division, the increasing polarity of the current social climate and the rift it's forming between us as individuals, totalitarianism, the growing spectre of dangerous and nefarious influences over our daily lives, whether we want it or not. We live in very uncertain times at the moment. On one hand, the human race is more advanced and more prosperous than ever before. On the other, we seem to be balanced on a knife's edge between further prosperity and growth or further decline, death and destruction. And in the middle stands people like us. What say do we have in all of this? Why don't we have control of our own lives like we once did? How do we take back the levers of power over our own choices and circumstances? Is there a way out of this? It's in uncertain times like these that I like to look at some of the characters in fiction that have undergone a lot more oppression and danger than any of us could comprehend. I find that by looking at how these fictional people dealt with unimaginable circumstances, it not only makes my own situation seem much more manageable, but also helps me realize how I can emulate them in a way to fight back and reclaim some lost control over my life. I can, in some small way, be almost like the heroes I read about, and in the process I can take steps towards saving my own life. In these difficult times where people's lives are being uprooted by forces outside of their control, we need to look at characters that faced similar situations. Just as large interests and governments are currently keeping us under their thumb, so too have some of these characters been oppressed by institutions that are larger than life and seemingly insurmountable. One of these characters, as you can guess, is Vin from Mistborn. Vin is a young peasant woman with magical abilities that finds herself in the middle of a plot to overthrow an empire. She doesn't just face any old empire or political institution. She faces, in her eyes, a literal god turned emperor of mankind. The Lord Ruler, an all-powerful, immortal being, leads the final empire and uses his power and influence to maintain absolute control over all aspects of life for his subjects. This is obviously a much worse situation than we find ourselves in at the moment, but fiction is often an exaggerated parody of real life in many ways, and by looking at the actions of characters in these extreme situations, we can find ways of dealing with our own problems, even if it's just in small ways. So what lesson is there in Vin's story? What can we learn by looking at her actions in the face of impossible odds? While we can't find a charismatic mentor to teach us magic that'll help us overcome any obstacle in life, we can do something else that Vin did. We can do something she did that set her down the path of becoming the liberator of her people. We can take control and choose freedom over safety. You see, Vin grew up on the streets, going from one gang of thieves to the next. While she suffered abuse at the hands of many of these thieves and even her own brother, it was a safe life. She knew what to expect. She learned how to navigate the world she found herself in. She found ways to escape begging and dying on the streets by obeying the whims of her abusers. She would get knocked about, yes, but she would live. As long as she kept her head down and did as she was told, she would live and would be able to continue living a better life than most living on plantations or the streets. But when an opportunity arrived, she had to make a choice. A man named Kelsia arrived and offered her a way out. He offered her another life. It wouldn't be a safe life. She would be in way over her head amongst people far more experienced and would have to enter a world completely alien to her. She would be up against the most powerful force the world had ever known and would be risking life and limb on a constant basis. The abuse she was used to hurt, but it was familiar. It was, in a twisted way, safe. But this was foreign. This was very risky. This was downright dangerous. You don't endeavor to take down a god emperor with magical powers and his entire empire without seeing it as the riskiest thing you've ever done. But she had to make a choice. She had to choose between a life where she had to obey and please the whims of others for safety, or a life where she could be free and fulfill her own potential at the risk of certain death. She had to choose between a life of safety or a life of freedom. And she chose freedom. And now I pose the question. In a world where things are so uncertain and scary, what choice do we make? Do we choose safety or freedom? Do we comply and hope the safety lasts, or do we fight and stand up for ourselves even if it carries significant risk? I propose that, while it is scary and uncertain, the best choice between the two would be to choose freedom over safety. It is my belief that choosing safety is choosing the worst of both worlds. As Benjamin Franklin once said, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty or safety." That's a pretty bold statement, but you guys know me. I'm not someone who just accepts things at face value. So let's actually examine the choice. Let's see why the sentiment of freedom over safety exists. Using Mistborn as an analog for the real world, let's examine why Vin made the choice she made, why we should make a similar choice, and what making this choice ultimately means for us as individuals and for society as a whole. Vin was one of the Scar, a genetically engineered class of people who were designed to be hard laborers and the slave class of society. They were the vast majority of the populace by an insane margin, yet were completely controlled by a small class of elites. When I first read Mistborn, I wondered why this is. If they're this gigantic population, it would be trivial for them to overthrow the Empire if they banded together. Now, of course, the Lord Ruler is incredibly powerful and created the Empire in the first place. He didn't, however, create it alone. He amassed an army and took over the world slowly and methodically. It was only really due to the supporters he had that he was able to take control. Despite his power, if he acted completely alone, it would have been much harder for him to do any of what he eventually accomplished. It becomes clear to me that the Scar, while oppressed and unhappy with their situation, ultimately chose safety in this matter. Even hundreds of years after the Empire was established, they chose to remain the slave class. There were small uprisings, yes, but the vast majority of them kept their heads down and chose to obey rather than risk retaliation. As the Japanese proverb goes, it's the nail that sticks out that gets hammered. Ultimately, the Scar chose safety over freedom. They chose the life of slavery over the uncertain life of freedom. Individuals might have differed, but as a collective, this is the obvious case. And ironically, those who chose safety over freedom ultimately got neither safety or freedom. I think this is very analogous to our current lives. How many people do you know that chose the safe job over something they would rather have done? How many people do you know that chose the safe spouse over the person they actually wanted to be with? How many of you, dear viewers who are currently watching this video, ultimately chose something safe and familiar whilst pining and wishing for something that would be more free and more fulfilling? You see, the problem with choosing safety is that it's not guaranteed. Oh sure, you could make the safer choice and keep your head down. You could go along to get along and try not to draw attention to yourself, sure. But who guarantees that safety to you? In the workplace, it's your employer. At home, it's your parents or your spouse. In society at large, it's the government. But all of these entities that you rely on for safety are completely out of your control. Nothing is stopping them from revoking your safety at any point. And what could you do to stop them? You gave up that freedom when you chose safety. You hope your boss doesn't fire you, but that's not really up to you. Even if you did the best work possible, it's still something completely at their discretion. The same goes for your spouse or partner. You could be the most doting and most loving partner in the world, but the decision doesn't rest with you. And the government? Well, you could be the most law-abiding citizen in the world, but the amount of atrocities committed by governments against their own people literally fill entire history books. You choose safety, yet it is a false sense of comfort. You're not really safe, and that's because you can never really be safe. The world is a dark and dangerous place. It always has been and always will be. So if giving up freedom for safety means the world becomes a little less dangerous for you, isn't that worth it? Well, it depends. Do you want to stay alive or do you want to live? It's easy to choose safety and stay alive. It's easy to wake up, go to work, put in the hours, go home, spend time with your partner, shower and go to bed only to do it all again the next day. That's the easiest thing in the world. And we know it is because it's what the majority of people do every single day. But how many of those people are happy? How many of those people wake up with a smile and a zest for life? How many people could be replaced by a robot and have nobody notice the difference? Is this all life is? The fulfillment of actions and the following of a routine? Is that what our ancestors lived, fought and died for? Were we born as an unfathomably long, unbroken line of father and son, mother and daughter, from the very first of our species until now, just to wither away? Do we just take the gift of life and then choose not to live? One need only look at the record high number of depression, suicides, anxiety, and social dysfunction to realize that this isn't what living is. This isn't what life is meant to be. We see chickens in factory farms and recoil in disgust, but when we look at ourselves and our own caged lives, we consider it normal. We look at wild animals in a zoo and feel pity for them and their captivity, but then happily go back to the prisons we've made and chosen for ourselves. We throw away freedom in the name of safety, but then hope the warden won't turn on us. We give power to the government and then hope that we won't be the next people in a line facing a wall. Life isn't safe. The world is a dark, dangerous, messy place. And in our fear, we've run straight into the jaws of the beast and hope that we won't be swallowed. So to repeat what Benjamin Franklin said, those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty or safety. I think the quote is perhaps oversimplified, but I don't think it's wrong. At the end of the day, the choice is ultimately yours to make. I can't live your life for you or make your decisions for you. In fact, I wouldn't even want to if I could. I want the freedom for you, the person sitting on the other side of the screen. I want you to live the best, most free life possible and to embrace every moment with the energy and care it deserves. I want you to live your life the way you want to live it. I want you to take this gift of life that's ever so short and precious and make the most of it. I want you to lie on your deathbed one day and look back with a smile because you chose to live a free life instead of a caged one. But I can't make that choice for you. That choice, my friend, is up to you. I can already picture you typing away angrily at my words here. If you were to forego safety, wouldn't that risk your life? If you were just to give up all the shackles binding you, wouldn't that make your life and the lives of others worse? Total freedom isn't something that could ever work because then you would just be free to hurt or imprison others, couldn't you? Well, you've got the right premise, but you're coming to the wrong conclusions. Yes, your life will be harder if you gave up safety for freedom. Yes, you would have to deal with a lot of uncertainty and doubt in a life where you choose to be free. But then you have to ask yourself, is the alternative worth it? Let me make an example. Think of the one person in life that you admire. Think of an athlete or a businessman or a celebrity or an author or literally any person that society would look up to. Now ask yourself if that person chose freedom or safety. You might not agree with them on every level, but can you really say that this person chose safety over freedom? Or did they embrace freedom and all the uncertainty that comes with it to make something out of their life? I believe that we as humans are instinctually drawn to people like that who have embraced freedom. There's a reason that all the notable people in modern life and in history were people who chose freedom and not people who chose safety. Do we as a society look to the employee drone who safely works in their cubicle? Or do we look to the startup entrepreneur who poured blood, sweat, and tears into everything they were passionate about in order to bring that company into existence? We as a species are drawn to freedom for a reason. It's because we are born free. We aren't born a worker drone like ants or bees. We are born as free individuals with the power to think, dream, love, inspire, and explore. It's only once society and other people convince us otherwise that we begin to place chains and shackles on ourselves. All of that being said, you can't have total freedom. I can't just walk up to you and take your phone because I fancy having the latest iPhone. We as humans recognize and idolize freedom, but only to the point where it infringes on the freedom of others. We support someone building their life to the best version it can be, but not if it comes at the direct expense of others. We recognize that our freedom is limited only by the freedom of others. So what else does this tell us about people? It tells us that people are naturally complementary to each other. We're meant to work together. We're a social species that is meant to cooperate and thrive and build a better world for each other. The ancient Stoics often said that we are rational and social beings. Thus, we must use our rationality to improve the world and society for our fellow man. But we cannot do this with imposition. We can't force a better, more free life on others. It's something they must choose. So many people have the desire to improve and better the world, but conversely, they see other people as an impediment to that goal. They want to build and shape a better world for other people, even if the other people don't want the vision that they have for the world. You might think that you have the perfect view of what the world should look like, but if it requires forcing others to conform to that view, then you're no better than the tyrants you currently insist you're fighting against. Change, even difficult change, can only be ethically done if we give people the freedom of choice. We need to give people all the tools to inform themselves and to take their lives into their own hands, but we can't force them to live the way we want them to live. We need to allow people the freedom to shape their own lives and their own destiny. Because if we don't, we become the very people who are now placing chains and shackles on others. What's worse is we'll think we're doing it for their own good. The choice between freedom and safety is one that every person must make at an individual level. It is something that is intensely personal. I believe that every person has a right to live their lives in any way that they see fit, even if I disagree with it, as long as they're not hurting anyone. I believe in allowing every person to make that choice for themselves. And if they make a choice that's right for them, what right do I have to disagree? I want you to make that choice. I would prefer it if you chose freedom, yes, and I will try to convince you to choose freedom to the best of my ability. But I only want you to choose it if you genuinely want it. I only want you to make that choice if it genuinely comes from within. So I ask you now, my fellow brother and sister in this giant family we call the human race, what choice will you make? It's scary, yes, but so is a number of other worthwhile things. It's difficult, yes, but no more difficult than many other important endeavors. It requires a lot of responsibility and personal accountability, sure, but that comes with the territory of being an individual person in this world and isn't exclusive to freedom. So I ask, what choice will you make? What is more important to you? Freedom or safety? Is it ever worth giving up a little bit of freedom for some safety? I, and Benjamin Franklin, would disagree. And so would Vin. Think about Vin and Kelsier and all the other Scar in the crew. All of them could easily have lived safer lives with less uncertainty and fear. Sure, it wouldn't have been the easiest life, but it's a damn sight better than facing an all-powerful God Emperor and the might of his entire millennia-old empire. But instead of choosing the easy path, they chose what was difficult. Vin chose freedom over safety. Vin could have stayed a street urchin, scratching out an existence in the thieving crews of Luthadel. But instead, she chose to stand up and fight. She chose to stand up for what she believed as a worthy cause and discarded the shackles she had placed on herself. She pursued freedom even at the cost of her own life, because without freedom, you can never truly be alive. I look at Vin's story and I feel inspired. It's because of characters like her and Kelsier that I could look at my life and confidently say that I wasn't happy with it. I could look to these characters and find inspiration in them to try and live a better, more free life. The choice that the hero makes, the hero of any story, is always freedom. You never hear of a story of someone who decided to stay in their safe space and avoid any discomfort in the world. It's only in stories of freedom and struggle that we find inspiration. I wanted to be the hero of my own life, so I chose freedom. Like I've said before, I can't make your choice for you. I can't tell you to choose freedom, nor can I even tell you how to pursue it. That is ultimately up to you and your unique circumstances. What I can do, though, is tell you what I've done to improve my own freedom. No, I didn't go out and choose to face down an evil empire like Vin, though that would be quite a story to tell. No, I chose freedom in a different way. I chose freedom in small ways through many different facets of my life. Unlike stories, real life doesn't always consist of big, sweeping decisions that radically alter the course and direction of our lives. It may happen once or twice in a person's life, but it's definitely the exception and not the rule. So what most of us experience is a life that's built up of millions of smaller choices. Small yet consequential actions taken every day that slowly pile up over time and change your life in big ways. This is how I have chosen to pursue freedom in my own life, through small yet consequential actions that pile up over time. I don't think you should copy everything I've done, since all of our circumstances are different. But hopefully, by sharing with you what I've done, you can take some of these examples and apply it to your own life. Hopefully, you can look at some of these examples and find ways to increase the amount of freedom in your daily life over time. And hey, if even one of these things help you in some small way, I will have seen all of this as completely worth it. I ultimately want to help you. So if this does help, then that's the best outcome I could hope for. So what I've done is look at the different aspects of my life and see how I can improve the freedom and thus control I have over that aspect. My reliance on external institutions, my health, my actions, and even my mental state to see how and where I could maximize freedom and control in these areas. The first thing I did was look at my financial situation. I've made it a priority to pay off my debt. Yes, it's hard, and yes, it's not as exciting as spending money, but I don't want that shadow looming over me. I don't want to feel trapped and controlled because I technically owe money to someone. I can never be truly free if my hard-earned money has to be handed over to someone else at the end of each month. I've also started saving money. Now, I'm going to say something that may be a bit controversial and that might put many people off who don't understand it, but I'm saving my money in Bitcoin. I'm not saying you should do this, and you actually shouldn't if you don't understand what Bitcoin is or why it works. I highly recommend you do your own research before making any decisions like this. But considering the fact that Bitcoin is the hardest money ever invented, and that no other investment on earth has been able to beat Bitcoin over a 4-year or longer time span, I feel confident in using it as a store of wealth. I've done a lot of reading and digging into Bitcoin, which is why I have the confidence in it that I do. I'm not telling you to invest in it, since the volatility it currently has during its adoption phase may be too extreme for some people. But the money I'm saving is long term, and I want that money saved in a hard currency that can't be inflated away like other currencies and that can't be controlled or taken away by someone else. Bitcoin is the best vehicle for that, and thus the best way for me to maximize my financial freedom. I won't say more on Bitcoin, since that's not the point of this video or this segment. If you are interested in it, I recommend reading the Bitcoin Standard, since it not only explains a lot about Bitcoin, but also explains how money works, the history of money, and why Bitcoin beats out other forms of money like gold or fiat currency. Please, please, please do your own research before putting your money into anything. Anyway, the next aspect of my life that I wanted to increase my freedom in was in areas where I was reliant on other people or institutions. For example, you're all probably very familiar with the current war going on in Ukraine. This, along with other things like lockdowns, have caused severe supply chain issues in the global economy. On top of that, you also have the incredible amount of new money printed and injected into the economy. The result? Higher prices for essential items like food and electricity. Now, I don't know about you, but I, for one, like it when my food is affordable. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily something you have a lot of direct control over. I came to the realization that I was relying on a huge network of suppliers, wholesalers, and producers just to feed myself. It's an obvious thing if you think about it, but it's something we often tend to take for granted in our everyday lives. I realized that to be free means to also take responsibility for yourself and your situation. Now, while I can't necessarily change this reliance I have overnight, I have started taking action. I've started a small vegetable garden. It's small and can't really feed me in perpetuity just yet, but it is a start. I'm growing broccoli, spinach, cauliflower, carrots, onions, beetroots, tomatoes, and chilies. On top of that, I'm slowly expanding into herbs as well. Growing your own food has immense benefits beyond just the savings it brings. It gets you closer with nature and helps you get more in tune with your place in the larger ecosphere of the planet. It's primal and grounding to put a seed in the soil and watch it grow as you nurture it. Beyond just being more self-sufficient in terms of food, I've also been looking into ways to rely less on my country's failing electrical grid. I want to get solar panels installed and find ways to rely less on government institutions. I'm even starting to save water and have plans to eventually have a rainwater tank installed. Taking life into your own hands is a long and arduous process. It's uncomfortable and messy at times, but you get so much out of it. Just the peace of mind alone has helped me remain calm despite all the global turmoil going on at the moment. Speaking of growing your own food, I've also started taking my health into my own hands. I'm trying to eat a healthier diet and have started a strict exercise program. I'm trying to limit the amount of sugar I consume as well as eating less carbohydrates. I do calisthenics daily and I might even start attending a martial arts class with my brother in the coming months. I took this step because I wasn't happy with my weight or my health in general. I was tired of feeling slow and lethargic. I didn't want to rely on chemicals and medication in order to just function like a normal human being. I've also cut back on certain substances. I almost never drink anymore and I don't smoke cannabis anymore either. The result is that I'm feeling better than ever before and I have a genuine sense of freedom when, for example, I'm able to climb 2 flights of stairs without even getting slightly winded. It sounds small, but as someone who was once severely overweight and who is now well on his way to a healthy body size, it's a major improvement in my quality of life. It's bitter work, yes, but absolutely worth it. I've been telling you guys all of this because I wanted to get an idea across to you about the concept of choosing freedom. As you could tell, none of these things I've done to increase freedom in my personal life are related to relying on others. I want to make it clear that choosing freedom isn't something you just achieve overnight, and it's certainly not something you get given to you by someone else. It's a collection of small choices and actions taken over the course of years. But you need to adopt the right mindset to even start this long journey. In order to choose freedom, you need to embrace the concept of radical ownership. This means that you need to own up to your flaws. You need to admit when you've messed up, and you need to realize that it's okay to make mistakes. I recommend watching the last video I posted about Zuko if you haven't yet, since it delves into this topic a lot more. But you need to be honest with yourself and take ownership when you've gone down the wrong path. Blaming others might feel like some kind of moral vindication, but it does nothing to fix the problem. Beyond owning up to your problems and flaws, you also need to take ownership of the solutions. Nobody is coming to save you. Nobody will be able to take away all your problems and make your life into the ideal you hope for. Only you can do that. Only you have the power to take control of your own life and put in the slow, steady effort needed to change it. All the power rests in your hands, but you must be willing to take responsibility and put the work in order to make it happen. Radical ownership is about admitting your flaws, taking responsibility for your problems, and actively working on the solutions. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick, but the results are staggering. And it really is the only way to achieve freedom. Vin was only able to become the hero we see her as after taking radical ownership of her own life. Only after she realized her problems and took responsibility for fixing them was she able to achieve freedom. And she didn't get freedom given to her instantly. It was daily effort over time that eventually allowed her to live a heroic life of freedom. And before we move on to the closing of this video, I just want to mention one last aspect of freedom, an aspect without which I would never even have begun to make the changes I have in my life. I'm talking, of course, about mental freedom. Mental freedom is something I define as complete equanimity. That means a total state of calm, even in the face of struggle and turmoil. Imagine a grisly ship captain staring down a storm on the horizon. Though the waters may be rough, he stands unshaken. The ability to keep my mind calm and focused regardless of what life throws my way is something I've only been able to cultivate over time with a lot of effort. And while I'm not always perfect at it, I've progressed to a point where I no longer fear whatever comes my way. Not because I'm impervious to life struggles, but because I know that I can adapt and overcome. I'm mentally prepared and ready to take on whatever may happen. Having this confidence in my mental ability is the equivalent of being given a 4th grade spelling test. Yeah, maybe they could throw a curveball of a word your way that you haven't seen in years, but ultimately you feel nothing but confidence. There's zero intimidation. Now, how did I achieve this mental clarity? If you've been paying attention to my channel over the last week or so, you probably already know the answer. I've embraced the teachings of the ancient philosophical school of Stoicism. And while I won't try to convert you, I do think there's value in teaching you some of the tools that have helped. Specifically, there are two phrases in the Stoic school that teach you to have this equanimity. The first phrase is amor fati. It means to love your fate, to love whatever struggle may come your way, not because these things are good or something you wanted, but because it will strengthen you. You can't avoid all the struggle in life, it's impossible. But what you can do is learn from the struggle in order to make future problems so easy it basically becomes insignificant. Love your fate because you not only get to practice dealing with hardship, but you get to practice virtue. If, for example, your friend accidentally breaks a precious ornament your mother gave you, you can think of amor fati and practice virtue. The virtue of wisdom tells you that this is an ornament and it's merely an object and it holds no more value than the bond you have with your friend or the love you have for your mother. The virtue of courage teaches you to face the fact that sometimes the people you care about can hurt you, even accidentally, and that this is not something to cower in fear from. The virtue of justice teaches you not to retaliate or to act unjustly towards your friend, even if you really did value the ornament. And the virtue of temperance teaches you to have control over your emotions and to not let anger or frustration blind you to the fact that humans make mistakes and that we're all imperfect beings on this earth. It's a simple example, but I think it helps to illustrate that by embracing the concept of loving your fate or amor fati, you can learn to deal with life's hardships, even in small, seemingly insignificant ways. By loving your fate, you choose to see the silver lining in every situation. If nothing else, a bad situation can at least prepare you to better deal with similar issues later on or help you appreciate when times are good. You love your fate not because you love hardship or struggle, but because you love the strength and endurance you gain from facing hardship or struggle. The second and hardest to accept of the two phrases is likely something some of you who are more philosophically inclined might have heard of. The phrase I'm talking about is memento mori. Memento mori roughly translates to remember that you will die or remember your mortality, which both basically equate to the same thing. It teaches us that death comes for us all. As uncomfortable a thought as that is, death is nothing evil or unnatural. It is merely a part of nature. And anything that is a part of nature is not something that is to be feared or abhorred. Life is constantly changing. The world is always in flux. You can never really know what will happen. The only thing in life you can be certain of, the single event you can say will happen with 100% certainty, is that you will die. Everything else is up to change based on external events. But your death was made certain the moment you were born, and nothing you do can change that. Now, this might sound morbid and scary, but it really isn't. For one, it helps ground you and make you realize that life is uncertain and we should cherish every moment we have. But it also shows us that death isn't something to be feared. It's as much a part of nature as the rising sun. Death is as much a part of our world as gravity or thermodynamics is. So why should we fear it? Why should we fear something that is inevitable and natural? The answer is that we shouldn't. There is no reason to fear death. We can try to avoid it, sure, but it will come for us eventually. The Stoics often say that we do not have the past since it is long gone, and we do not have the future since it is unknown and yet to come. All we have is the present. So whether someone dies at 20 or at 80, they have lost nothing but the present moment. All we have is the present and we're destined to lose it at some point. So why do we worry if this is the moment we lose it? The funny thing about no longer having a crippling fear of death is that it makes all other problems in life seem small by comparison. And ultimately it is. If you know you have this one life and that it'll be gone one day, then failing that math test or losing out on that promotion or breaking up with your partner or even losing a loved one is a small thing compared to the fact that there will be a time when you won't even be able to experience these negative things. Because you'll be gone, and eventually so will the memory of you. Memento Mori teaches us not to fear our own death or the death of loved ones, because fearing something as natural as the sunrise and sunset is nothing short of foolishness. I'm not saying that Memento Mori and Amor Fati will be easy concepts to internalize. They take time and dedication to really get them ingrained in your mind, since so much of our lives are spent in direct contradiction to these concepts. You're trying to undo a lifetime of brainwashing, so accept that it will take some time. But without the mental freedom these ideas brought to me, I would never even have started taking control of my life in other ways. I wouldn't have started taking my financial issues seriously. I wouldn't have started taking care of my health and fitness. My vegetable garden wouldn't exist right now. It's all thanks to the mental freedom I've gained from studying Stoicism and these two concepts that come with it. Freedom begins in the mind, so start there and see where it takes you. Vin, as I hope I've made clear in this video, was a hero who chose freedom over safety, even in the face of impossible odds and death. In fact, she wouldn't even have been considered a hero if she chose safety over freedom. She'd just be another slave in a brutal empire, another cog in the wheel. Insignificant. But she made the choice of heroes. It is not an easy choice. It is not a choice that can be made once. It is a choice that must be made every day and worked on every day. She made the choice despite the hardship. She showed me that I can change my own life, even if in small ways, by focusing on the choices I make every day and ensuring that I always choose freedom. And now that I've shown you what the choices are, I hope that you will also choose freedom. Not for me, but for yourself. Make the choice that will enrich your life, but do so knowing that it was you who made the choice, not someone else who made it for you. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate the time you've given me in watching this video. If you've enjoyed it and would like to support the channel in some way, consider hitting the like button and subscribing, since that tells YouTube to promote it and share this video with more people. Let me know what choices you've made recently. Has there been a moment where you chose freedom over safety, or vice versa? Even if it's small, I'd love to hear about it. And if you have trouble choosing freedom and need some encouragement, let me know. I'm always here to provide and support encouragement. Anyway, take care and we'll talk again very soon.